So real time, does it mean anything to you?
Real time, as a phrase, part of me will say, well, so tell me what you think it means to you. I can look at it and say, do we think that there are real-time experiences that we're going to enable through our cloud-based services? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can argue today we have real-time, now it's mostly peer-to-peer, but real-time experiences today on Xbox Live.
Right.
Right?
Kind of pioneered it, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you'd say, well, that's a real-time experience. Now, somebody else could come in and say, no, let me define real-time in the gaming space slightly differently for you. To me, real-time means everything's served from a server. And this is not peer-to-peer. In fact, in the most extreme case, you could say there's no client, and we're going to have a server-led gaming experience. I think that's actually quite a long ways away, personally. I can tell you about the physics of that. I actually think it's quite hard. And I think the business economics of it are very, very difficult because it doesn't actually scale very well.
So what are you saying, that basically Google's not going to get there?
Well, I'm not going to make any positive about what Google's doing. They're actually not the guys who have proposed this. There's some other guys who have actually showed some of this at the Game Developer Conference. They showed some concepts. Steve Perlman and those guys have showed some stuff. And there's interesting technology. There's places where, and they may achieve some breakthroughs that make it happen earlier than I think. But when we look at it, we say, okay, all of these things are possible. Let's go through the stages of development of where we're at and just recognize where we are today and where we might end up. And doing a server-based delivery just because you can, if it degrades the consumer experience, why would you do it? I mean, you have this funny technology advancement going on in the space where people would say, well, gosh, things are moving to the cloud. And I say, verily, yes, some set of things absolutely are and should move to the cloud. But at the same time, I would tell you, client power is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and more available on more and more devices. And so you have this very interesting dynamic where, the phone has never been more powerful as a client, right? And you can only see that increasing. In a year's time, you'll be able to do Xbox One graphics on a phone. So you'd say, okay, now, why would I render that on the cloud? And there might be reasons why you do it. But you'd also have to ask yourself, gosh, what's the experience like, and how do I produce the best experience?
So, what do you see as the advantages of the cloud in terms of what you're working on?
Well, for us, the cloud does a number of things. First of all, it enables us to create community, right? I mean, the biggest thing, people ask, why is Xbox Live successful? Why do we have 20 million members on Xbox Live? And, a good percentage of those people who pay us real money for a subscription every year. And some of it's about multiplayer gaming, I will grant you. But a significant portion of it is about those people saying, hey, this is where I meet my friends. This is where we do things together. And if you don't have a cloud set of services behind that gets actually quite hard. How do we do the types of things we're doing now where you and your friends will be able to watch a movie together and not be in the same room? That requires a set of cloud-based services behind it to enable that to happen in a rich and effective way. And by the way, talk and see each other at the same time. It's a pretty interesting experience and a pretty interesting trick. And that all happens through the work that we're able to do on Xbox Live. So, to me, the biggest thing that the cloud does to us, sort of in the immediate term, is it gives us a social environment. It gives us the ability for people to do things together.
All right, so that naturally brings us to this new real-time phenomenon that some people think started with Twitter, but others think the Twitter is just an example of something. What's your take on that stuff?
Well, I think it's just part of the socialization experience. I mean, we announced at E3 that on Xbox Live we're going to have a client for both Twitter and Facebook and MySpace type integration. We think that's actually a nice part of the environment. I don't really know what the business model. I don't really understand the business model. I'm not an expert on it, so there may be a business model there. I haven't seen it yet, so we'll see how that plays out. But certainly is there demand for people to have that kind of rich interaction and real-time communications experience? And the answer is yes. Now, how long-lived that is, how pervasive it is, how wide does it go? You've seen Facebook, MySpace go pretty wide.
Mm-hmm.
I think Twitter and these, what I would call almost, a blend between text messaging and blogging.
Right.
Right. There's certainly strong appeal to that now. We'll see how that plays out over time. For us, it's just part of the trend I said about earlier, which is about socialization. And so we want to enable people who are Xbox Live customers to have that be part of their experience.
So one of the things I talked to, to Ray about, and also to Brian, was the notion of this kind of real-time technology finding a home at the center of the desktop. Now, since you're basically dealing with multiple platforms,
right,
and providing shared experiences, I guess is the way to put it.
Sure.
Across these different, do you see that as?
What do you mean by the center of the desktop?
Well, I mean, right now, what would you say is the center of Office? Right? It would be Outlook, right?
No question.
Okay, so that's email,
calendar, contacts.
right? And Messenger isn't one of those.
That depends. That actually depends on. It's not. That actually depends on. This is where Office Communicator is an important element.
Yeah.
That'll depend on who you are. So around here, and around a lot of companies, Office Communicator is the way people talk in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
For better or for worse.
So, is there an intersection point between Communicator and what you're doing?
I suppose there is, although little of what I do you would call productivity work. There's a few exceptions in the division, but generally speaking, the things we do are sort of the flip side of, we're sort of the leisure and entertainment part of what we do. Now, having said that, the principles of those things absolutely do carry across.
Mm-hmm. Give me an example.
Well, take example on Xbox Live. People do a ton, you'd be stunned, at how much text chatting they do across the Xbox Live network.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a lot. And, it's millions of messages. And, how's that different than two people in a meeting of 14 sending an Office Communicator message to each other saying, gosh, I wish this meeting would end? Right? It's just part of the social fabric that we're creating. Many times what I think on both sides we're doing, because work and play are both parts of the social fabric, on many parts what we're doing is creating fabric in socialization, using technology to create new fabric for socialization. And Twitter's part of that, Communicator's part of that, text messaging is part of that, Facebook is part of that, email is part of that, video conferencing is part of that. We sell a camera for your Xbox. You'd be amazed at the types of activity that generates on Xbox Live of people who want to see other people while they play their game.
Mm-hmm.
And we demonstrated this camera technology at E3. That's another part of the social fabric. You're now going to create a whole new set of ways for people to interact and experience things in a social setting.
And once you have the camera, then you might start to use it in other contexts.
You very well might want to use it in other contexts. Now, the camera for us, in the case of Project Natal, the camera for us has a number of different aspects. First, there's just the fact that you have visual input and you can actually see other people. So that's interesting in and of itself. But it goes one step beyond that, which says, no, not only is the camera the way for communications to happen, but it's the way for the interaction with the device to happen. So now it becomes the user interface, if you will.
The mouse.
It becomes the mouse, the keyboard, in the case of gaming, the controller, for whatever you want to do. Now, that's a very interesting concept. And, of course, people's immediate reaction after that was, first of all, from a gaming perspective, they went, wow. So it's just kind of, you see the demos, and the demos aren't made up. They're real. We actually had people go in and say, no, that wasn't made up on stage. Go do it. And you have people go do it, and they go, oh, well, I thought it was cool, but I thought it was gimmicky. Now I see it's actually works, and I just walked in and did it. So that the demo parts are all cool, but the second reaction people get is, so what do you do what does this mean for the PC? And maybe not at E3, but after E3, we had people say, what does it mean for the office?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so on one hand you'd say, well, just think of the possibilities, and there are some interesting possibilities, but it's nothing like what we would do on Xbox, I don't think. Xbox is a, 10-foot experience in front of a big screen with lots where hand motion and activity makes sense. I mean, if I'm sitting here standing at my desk, 6 inches away from the screen doing this, it's not clear that that's going to be value added versus, just using my hand on a mouse and making the screen drive. So the scenarios, I think, will end up being different. So what we'll go do is we'll go do some testing. We'll go say, hey, let's put some creative people on the experience side of this. The technology part we'll keep making progress on, but let's think about the user experience. What actually would somebody use that camera for? What would be the ways in which you could do interesting things beyond video conferencing, for which you don't need a 3D camera? So we'll go and explore that, and we'll see where that plays out.
So when you started doing the sort of real-time interaction on Xbox, I mean, was that something that you discovered during the process of thinking about other things, or
no?
Was that the goal from the beginning?
It was the goal from the beginning. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of in the Xbox space is from the first concept meetings, we said this is going to be an online environment. And at first, that was a technological statement, so we had to figure out, okay, what technology do we have to have in? Somebody's got to do a bunch of networking, there's some networking software, and we got to think about whether, you'll laugh at this, but we had to decide whether we had a modem or not. 2000, 2001 was about the time when that transition was happening, and the fact that we took the modem out was hugely controversial. Sort of funny historical fact,
and the right thing.
The right thing to do. It was the right decision, as it turned out. But we were criticized for it. You go back and read the articles. People said, "Oh, no, not enough people have broadband. You got to have a modem." Well, for the experience we wanted to have, having a modem wouldn't have mattered. Right? You couldn't have had a good enough experience anyway. So why bother? It wasn't worth the cost. From the beginning, we said Xbox Live has a set of principles that we're gonna abide by. One of those was every game will be voice enabled. You don't have an option. If you want your game to run on Xbox Live, you have to support voice. And, we had a lot of people said, wow, that's crazy. It's going to take up system resources and yick. Well, if you want to have a real-time experience between you and I, we better at least be able to talk to each other, right? I mean, you can't have a social gaming experience if you can't talk to each other. And by the way, independent of the fact that people send a lot of text messages on Xbox Live, it's darn hard to type with a controller. It's not an ideal experience. So the fact that voice was there from the beginning kind of changed the way people thought about things. So I think from the beginning, sometimes we stumble into things. Sometimes things evolve in a fortuitous way, and you find a way.
Like what?
Oh, I think they happen in a number. That happens in a number of places. But even in things, if I go back historically to think about, Word and Excel, and some of the things we talked about there, and some of the experience. Would I have said that would have led to SharePoint? No, we didn't start with Office and say, oh gosh, sometime this will be a server, and at least I didn't. Maybe there was somebody else who did. And when I was working in the group, we didn't think of that as a logical evolution. But in fact, when we saw what was happening with networking and communications and people's desire to have real time and intranets, we said, oh wow, SharePoint, and now SharePoint's a big part of that business. So sometimes things evolve that way. Sometimes things like something like Xbox Live is more intentional.
So, mobile. How's that going to start to resonate off of the other things you're doing?
Well, if you think about it, mobile has kind of a multitude of roles for us here inside the company. First of all, phones are becoming a platform by themselves, right? So they're another computing platform. We're going to play we think an important role in that computing platform. Secondly, they turn out to be an important screen, the role of which is only just becoming apparent to people, and might be slightly different than the PC screen and the TV screen because of form factor and where you are and environment and those types of things. But there's a bunch of things people are going to want to get on their phone. And so for us, it's another distribution point, if you will, for services. So it's sort of a business by itself, which is called, selling into what's going to be a big market for smartphones. And then there's a second key component, which is, hey, it's central to what we're doing in terms of our 3 screens and cloud strategy. And our job is to make sure that our services integrate well and sing well across all 3 of those local experiences on the TV, predominantly with Xbox today, on the PC with the PC, and on a phone. And we have to make sure that we do a great job delivering that. And I think the secret for us is in the software and the service delivery. That's where we're going to be, where we're going to do our best work.
Well, Zune seems to be sort of an odd man out there.
Well, no, not really. I think the thing you realize with Zune is you have to think about Zune in a couple of different ways. You have to think of Zune as both a vertical, portable music experience. And if you look at Zune HD, it's a great experience. It connects to our services. It's a first-class citizen. I just think of it, it's another portable screen. It just happens to be a very specialized portable screen because it really does music and video, and it's not a phone, and we don't have any plans for it to be a phone. So that's Zune in a vertical sense. But you're also seeing us move the Zune experience horizontally. So you now see it on the PC, you see it on the Zune device, you see it on Xbox, you'll see that experience elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And increasingly we think of music and video as being experiences that show up on all the different screens. And you should think of Zune as our brand for delivering that music and video across all the different screens.
So it'll integrate with the phone, in other words.
We don't have anything to announce and haven't announced anything.
Sure.
You're not, we know there's other screens where Zune isn't yet. So there's more things we can do.
So what, can you break down a percentage of time on each of these things that you spend?
That I spend? I probably spend most of my time today working in the phone environment. And interestingly, a fair amount of my time on the PC environment, both of those. But a little less on, actually, meaningfully less on Xbox than I used to because Don Matrick now runs that business. And he actually has more experience in the gaming space than I do by a factor of 2. And so independent of the fact that I ran that for 6 or 7 years, he's doing a great job. The Xbox business has probably been in the best shape it's been in ever. And he continues to run that. So I spend a little less of my time on Xbox and a little bit more of my time on mobile and on the PC screen.
So what are you doing in the mobile space?
Well, so there's sort of short-term and medium-term things, and then obviously long-term. Long-term we sort of already talked about, and I'll only talk about that philosophically.
Sure, I understand.
But in the short to medium term, the next deliverable is Windows Mobile 6.5, and the rollout of our brand around Windows phones. So that'll come this fall, and then obviously there's future work beyond that to continue to advance the work we're doing there. There's a set of services we've announced, a marketplace for Windows Mobile 6.5 and My Phone, which is a cloud-based service that enables you to both have your phone backed up as well as exchange and move data around between your phone and your PC in an easy and natural way.
Does that use mesh?
Yeah, it does. It does. So you'll see us start to integrate all those technologies. I mean, this is the place where we have real capability because it's not just the Windows Mobile team that's doing work. It's the Mesh team that's doing work. It's the Silverlight team that's doing work. It's the Azure team that's doing work. And you mentioned earlier that you don't think people really understand the full import of our strategy. I mean, some of that's because there's a lot of parts to the strategy.
Right.
Sometimes we don't do a good job of stepping back and communicating the richness of everything that's there. And sometimes it's just the fact that we're constantly enhancing it. It's not like we ship a product that's called Realtime, and suddenly it all just shows up there.
Sure.
Right? Azure comes at last year's PDC, and we announce Azure. Okay, so people get that. And then there's, My Phone gets announced at Mobile World Congress, and a different event, certainly connected. Mesh is at a different place. Silverlight's at the at Mix. So you have all these components that are sort of part of their own space, but which we are absolutely knitting together.
Yeah, talk about Silverlight a little bit. How does that intersect with what you're...
Well, Silverlight, for us, has a number of different and interesting aspects to it. First of all, as a business model enabler in the advertising space, it's certainly a way people are using to produce ads in the online world, whether that's on the PC or on a mobile phone or on Xbox or on any other type of device. So that's one aspect to it. It also turns out to be, part of our development platform, just more generally. So beyond advertising, which you could think of as quote unquote a simple app, you can take that much more into much richer space with a richer set of applications, and you'll see that spread across the product line and across the screens that we're doing. And so, to me, Silverlight is one of those central components to what we have to do.
So, gaming space, how's that?
You should. We haven't announced anything, and I think you'll see us make progress in the gaming space. Today, the environment we typically use for gaming is XNA, which is a great technology and continues to go well. And over time, we'll have to make sure we make it clear how that fits in with the Silverlight vision.
So, what I'm hearing here is you've sort of had so much success in the Xbox space that you basically, sort of kicked yourself upstairs. And that's what I'm hearing.
Sure.
And there's obviously great opportunity and also some challenges in the mobile space.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
So, tell me about the challenges.
Well, I think the challenges are fairly straightforward. There's just a lot of competition. It's a tremendous opportunity for a lot of people.
What's your take on the pre?
I think it's interesting. I think you have to ask yourself, okay, so where does it truly differentiate itself in a way in which it stands out from the other guys? And because of their market position, they're going to have to truly stand out. And so we'll see how that plays out. They've made an interesting play around having touch and a keyboard. So we'll see whether that plays out and whether that's a big enough of a differentiator. I think the challenge they're going to have is it's what I would call a vertical experience that doesn't have consistent depth in all of the verticals. We'll see how their music and video story plays out as a consumer device because they're sort of decided they'd be dependent on iTunes. We'll see how long Apple allows them to do that. We'll see how that plays out. But
a couple weeks maybe.
Yeah, that would have been my reaction. I'm not close enough to the situation to really understand it, but without that, they don't really have a music and video play, which I think is tough in today's phone market. I think it gets harder and harder to be credible in that space. So I think it's one of those interesting things where if the product had come out 2 years ago, when Palm's market position was a little bit differently, you might have a different reaction than you do today, and we're just going to have to see how it plays out. It might play out well for them. It's probably a good bet for them to place, given where they are in the market. But I think it's far from a sure thing, just given how much competition there is.
Android.
Android, in some ways, sort of in a similar place. I think they've got some interesting things going on. People are certainly going to experiment with it. That's not a big surprise. And so you'll see some phones this fall. You've already seen a couple. You'll see a few more. The question with Android is going to become: is this a vertical play from Google or is it a horizontal play?
How do you mean?
Well, as a vertical play, I mean it's a Google phone, and I don't mean they own the phone literally, but I mean it has a prescribed set of Google services on it. It's a Google experience from end to end, and they're going to incubate that and care for it.
Well, isn't that what Windows Mobile is?
No, actually today Windows Mobile is much more of a horizontal play. We don't actually, when you look at a Windows Mobile phone through Verizon, as an example today, or through AT&T, they have a lot of their own services on there. It's not pre-subscribed. It's not a lot of requirements. And actually, we service a broad breadth of hardware. Google has been sort of saying there's going to be a Google experience and a broad breadth of hardware, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. They're also, going to have to decide how deep they want to get on each of the experiences and how well they want to fine-tune them. I would describe the early Android phones as having some nice characteristics, but not as deep as it's going to need to be across all these different experiences, and they're going to have to decide how to do that. And they're going to have to decide how they make money at it. Today, it's a little unclear what the actual business model is. They don't actually require you to use their search. And search, by the way, is pretty tough to monetize, at least today. I think that'll change over time, but it's still tough to monetize today. So I think we're going to have to see how that plays out. They're certainly a worthy competitor.
So, you can touch on the iPhone if you like, but we're back to Windows Mobile. So what are we going to see?
What we need to do in Windows Mobile and what we are doing with Windows Mobile is sort of two-pronged things. First, you have to see what I'll call user experience innovation from us. And we'll start a little bit of that with what we're doing in 6.5. There's very nice advancements in 6.5 along those lines. And then you'll see more in the future on that front. Because certainly the user experience is critical on these devices. And because they've gotten so rich technically, you can do rich user experiences now. And today, our user experience isn't quite as rich as we'd like, and I think 6.5 will take that one step up, and then you'll see more from us in the future. And then the second aspect of it is really understanding what services we want to deliver on the phone and how those integrate into the user experience that I just talked about. And Marketplace and My Phone are the first two examples of that, and you'll see more work from us in that space.
Okay.
And the important thing I'll just point out about that, to tie to the topic we started on, is at some level, people will choose phones based on just the hardware design. That's certainly true. Some level, they'll choose it based on the core experience of the device and the phone itself. And ultimately, people are going to start choosing phones based on the services they get access to and what that service experience is like.
Which is the social kind of...
It's the social experience that I talked about. It's the, I can get this on my TV screen, on my PC screen, and on my phone screen. It's a, if you will, next level of functionality and capability that people are going to come to expect. And they don't expect that today. And I think as you go out, 12 months to 18 months, 24 months, 3-4 years, that's going to start to become part of the expectation. And now the requirements and capabilities you need as a supplier of technology in that space change. And I would say that Microsoft's capabilities there, that development helps us and puts us in a much better position to compete.
So you've got large scale right now in terms of Windows Mobile.
Yep.
And significant deficiencies in terms of experience.
Yeah, we need. This past year was almost 20 million phones, so we feel good about that scale.
Sure.
And there are some parts of the experience that we think are awesome. We think as a business user, our mail experience, the work we do with Outlook and Exchange, we think that's world class, and that continues to be world class. If you looked at us as a consumer device, that's probably the place where we need to make the most progress and the place where we're investing the most.
Well, the browser experience is
agreed.
That
6.5 has a huge improvement in the browser experience, and I'll stand by the 6.5 experience on browser in a very nice way. I think that'll actually be a big step up.
And how do you see the interaction with Azure?
On the mobile side or just overall?
Well, overall, but
I think if you look across what we want to do with Azure, Azure creates whole new scenarios of things people can do, and it enables things to be processed in the cloud or in a cooperative way between the cloud and the client that we wouldn't have been able to assume before. That does create some really interesting new scenarios. Now, you got to decide in all these things, you have to decide which things you want to be processed in the cloud and which things you want to be processed locally and divide that up in a logical way. And that'll actually be the art of creating a great end-to-end experience.
Well, to your point, one of the things that I thought was most interesting about the Google Wave demo,
right.
I don't know if you saw that or not,
right,
was this, I always forget the word for it, but it wasn't a spell check as much as it was actually using a bot to go in and scrape the text,
right,
and send it to the server,
right,
and perform, a lookup in terms of context, as
right,
opposed to, so that
almost like grammar checking.
Yeah, that's the word.
Right.
Okay, it wasn't almost; it was grammar checking, and what was interesting is that I can remember for maybe 10 years the statement that was not going to happen off the server. It wasn't going to be a function of the cloud, and I'm not saying that this put the lie to that, but I think that in general.
Why was it better because of the cloud?
I guess I don't think it was better. I think that it was identical.
So I think this is the interesting debate. on this balance between client and cloud.
Right.
And like when we talk about what we do, we'll always tell you we think there's going to be rich client work because we believe that. And yet at the same time, we believe the cloud's incredibly important. So what I would say in response to that is neat technically, so it proves some things that you can do it technically. Mm-hmm. But I'd ask yourself the question, I should want to use that vehicle and take up the bandwidth for that vehicle and the battery life off the phone for that vehicle for things that where I can only do it with the cloud, or I can do it uniquely better with the cloud, or there's some customer benefit to doing it with the cloud. And for the things that I can do locally just as well, that I can do faster locally without taking up the bandwidth and without sucking battery life, I should do those locally. And to me, the secret of all these experiences is the balance between those things. And
right. People
come to real-time or cloud computing or however you want to think about this with everything's going to go to the cloud. I think that's wrong. I really do.